Okay, well, let's just talk about the discussions today. Were they as beneficial or positive as you had hoped coming in?
Oh, very much so, very much so. It was indicated quite clear that discussion between the railways, the grain companies and the farmers to have the information shared is so vitally important. That was lacking over the years, along with the investment that we heard this afternoon here by the railways, and it's certainly a very positive, it was a very positive meeting. Not without problems, not that there's not going to be some problems, but in fact there's a major investment in hopper cars, lengths of trains, capacity to haul grain, all which is so vitally important. On-time delivery, as Mark and I are fully aware, is vitally important when you're dealing with the world market. If you do not supply on time, somebody else will. We're going to make sure we do.
What concerns did you hear come up today?
Oh, more cars, faster, more sidings. I'm a farmer. I can understand very well that, it's hard to solve everything instantaneously, but this major investments taking place, I would have to say it was a very positive meeting. It was very positive. The railways were quite open. They indicated quite clearly what they're going to do, and farmers were very open with their questions with the railways. So that's great. And they also indicated that the open collaboration is so vitally important.
So I would say that it's perfectly natural for our producers, grain and pulse producers, particularly at this time of the year when they're busy with harvesting, to be thinking about, well, how efficiently are we going to move our grain to the markets? And that's totally normal, and those are things that are expressed by them because that's their livelihood. At the same time, I think that we got a very clear indication today from the railways that they're making significant capital expenditures to improve their resiliency. And what I mean by that is they're buying lots more locomotives, a lot more hopper cars and modern hopper cars that have more capacity. They're training more locomotive engineers to operate the trains, and what that gives us is resiliency, particularly when we face things that we can't totally predict ahead of time. I mean, if we could predict the weather ahead of time in the winter, if we could predict the market price ahead of time for grain and how big harvests would be, we would have less of a challenge. But what we do want to make sure is in place is as reliable as possible railway transportation system to get their grain to market.
Can I ask, would extra pipeline space to haul oil somehow relieve the grain backlog a little bit? Because right now we're shipping a lot of oil by rail, and if we had an extra pipeline, some say it might help.
Well, you know our commitment in our government. We have very clearly indicated that we believe that oil from both Alberta and Saskatchewan in the national interest should be moving to foreign markets on the West Coast via pipeline, our commitment to the TMX. We've also indicated our commitment to the Keystone Pipeline as well. So we believe that that's the best way to move oil, and of course, consequently, it would have an impact on how much is transported by train.
You said new cars. Is there a shortage of grain cars right now, or is there a shortage that's coming?
So what happened is that back in the 80s, the federal government invested and bought for the railways a large number of hopper cars. Some of these are getting towards the end of their life. And so they have to be replaced. Now, the newer hopper cars, and they're being ordered now, they're shorter, but they're wider and they have more capacity, and they're brand new. And so both railway companies, CN and CP, are making significant expenditures, and this is in part to replace the aging hopper cars, but they will end up with more capacity than before because we know that the amount of crops that we're going to continue having, if we look at the trend in the past 10 years, it's going to continue to increase. So we want to have that capacity.
Leaving aside the railway investment, how long will it take until you've got a clear picture of whether C-49 is working the way it's intended to? It's only 4 months old at this point. How long do you need to look at how a piece of legislation that comprehensive is, working in practice?
Well, I'd like to say that we're building, CN has ordered 1,000 new hopper cars, more efficient, carrying more grain. That, number one, is a major issue. And of course, there are more sidings going in, more efficiency in the railways, more conductors, as Mark has indicated, more grain moving by car, more capacity means better transportation and on-time delivery.
With all due respect, sir, so is that a response to Bill C-49, or would that have been on the books anyway?
No, it's a response to C-49
of course
because
it is.
of changes that we made with respect to what's called the MRE. So it's very much a part of that because we realize that we need to help our shippers, we need to help our producers, but we also, it's in our interest to have a healthy railway system, and therefore we need to provide incentives to the railways to invest in new infrastructure, and that is deliberately coming from C-49.
And of course CP is also investing heavily in rail cars and different types of tracks, sidings, all that too. So both railway companies are investing heavily. And that's because of C-49. But there's reciprocal penalties. There's many other things in C-49. I ship by rail myself as a farmer. I'm well aware of what took place. If the car didn't come in, tough luck. If you're a little late loading the car, you pay the premium. So, there's a lot of efficiency in C-49. We care about the farmers. Being one, I truly do too.
Will we see another meeting like this in 6 months to sort of allow producers to have a direct say like we did here today, or are we going to see a meeting like that in the future?
We're certainly open to it, and as somebody asked, how long will it take to see how C-49 is going? There are a lot of new things that have been introduced. One that is quite different from before is called long-haul interswitching, and there's more openness and transparency, and the CTA, the Canadian Transportation Agency, has more latitude. So, yes, we're very open to, in 6 months or at some point in the future, to sit down again and say, okay, let's have a look at how's it worked this past winter, that kind of thing.
But I think it's fair to say I've met with everybody in this room a number of times. I had a lot of roundtables in this part of the country. I had roundtables in Ottawa. We have been very open, Mark and I, to the railways, to the farmers and to the shippers to make sure that we work together. And that's one thing that was indicated quite clearly here today, is that the cooperation, open dialogue, also with the investment is so vitally important. Are things answered immediately? No. But they will be. And it's we're doing this not only for this year and next year, but for many years down the road. We're going to invest over $75 billion worth of agriculture and agri-food products by 2025, and it means that you have to have an efficient railway system to do it, and we will have that.
You mentioned MRE. Was that a topic of discussion here today? Anybody concerned about that?
I don't think it come up today, no. But the soybean growers were very pleased that they were under the MRE. And, of course, that was something that Mark and I worked on and made sure it happened, and it did happen.
And the railways, they're happy too?
Well, everybody seemed to be very happy here today. It was an open dialogue, and that's exactly what it was. But these things happen with discussion with everybody, with farmers, with grain companies, and with the railways. And you have to work together. Everybody wants it to work. And if you work together, it will work a lot better. And that's basically what happened here today. And there will be meetings like this over the next number of years, I would expect and hope. And I certainly want to see it that way.
Last couple questions.
And the railway companies are publicly posting their status on moving grain, and also the fact that they are making billions of dollars worth of investment in capital, as we speak.
Should the worst happen and we do get another major backlog this winter, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but have you thought about what your response could be in that situation?
Well, on the 1st of October, both CN and CP have to produce their winter contingency
plans. And I sort of mean if those
let's just put it this way: we will watch it. We're watching it on almost a daily basis because obviously we want to see it work, and we want to see how many new things are going to work out this winter. The one thing we can't predict, although I understand Minister Goodale told me the Farmers' Almanac is predicting a cold winter. I don't know. He says it's right 9 times out of 10. Is that correct?
I doubt it.
Goodale is right.
But I want to say that the open dialogue is so important on this issue that you asked. That's what's so important. Look, if it's a hard thing to answer to, But the fact is we're doing everything we possibly can with the railways and with the grain companies to make sure that we have the appropriate system in place. That's what we started out with C49, and that's what we ended up with.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Dale Leftwich with RealAgriculture. I'm in Saskatoon with Jack Fraze. They just had a roundtable on transportation. Jack, did you hear some things here today that made you feel better about the transportation?
Yes, there's actually been a lot of positives coming out of Bill C49 with a lot more collaboration between railroads and the whole grain production unit per se. It's good to converse and let them know what kind of crops coming forward so that they can make some plans, and they've been mandated by government to come up with plans as well as winter plans on how they're going to move the grain. So it's good to be letting them know what kind of crops coming so that they can plan ahead.
So in the room today, there were a lot of commodity groups, a lot of farm groups were in the room today, but also the railways. So did you have a good dialogue between the two of you? Kind of sworn enemies over history.
Well, it wasn't so much the dialogue. It was they were reporting on their plans and what they're planning to do for this coming crop year, how they're going to move the grain. They were interested in, and they obviously know what kind of crop is coming, and also what kind of residual crops are sitting on the farm, so they can look at, are we moving 65 million metric ton? Are we moving 75? Or they're expecting a crop of about 69 million metric ton with 4 or 5 million of residual that has to be moved in the coming year. So we were looking at how this can be moved, and they're looking at putting efficiencies into the system with new rolling stock, new locomotives, bigger cars that can handle more, and so you can get more cars into a train, possibly lengthening the train itself, and so that would bring lots of efficiencies, but we're also building capacity, and we know that we're all looking to grow bigger crops with technology and what have you, so we're also looking at capacity as well.
So one of the things that has spurred on this is all the change and all the investment is change in the MREs. Does that mean that they are going to have more efficiencies, or do we know where the money is going to come from to buy the new rail cars and that kind of thing?
Well, I'm sure eventually it comes out of one pocket, right? But if we're going to get a service for it, and we can move our grain and capture those markets. If you're moving the grain at the key times when the market's there and when the premiums are there, then you should be able to capture value, which will translate back to some of the costs. But that would certainly be a big positive. And some of the markets, if you can't access them at the right time, they just disappear or evaporate. And this will help us capture some of those markets as well.
So overall, it was a positive message with a positive meeting with Mark Garneau and Lawrence McCauley. They were mostly listening, or did they have message to the farmers, or were they mostly talking about the new bill and seeing how it would work?
They were listening to see, what kind of collaborations is happening. Obviously, we've had some very tough years of rail movement in the last 5, and they want to make sure that these things are not repeated, and also looking to the future, like what is needed in the future to make sure that the grain moves.
Okay, well, I just want to thank Jack Fraze for coming with us today on Real Agriculture, and best of luck in your harvest this fall, Jack.
Thank you very much, Dale.